Well, welcome to the session Advancing Digital Accessibility, Insights and Strategies from GSA's Government-Wide IT Accessibility Program. If you're joining us online, please place your questions in the Q&A panel rather than in the chat panel, as chat will not be moderated. For attendees in the room, please hold your questions until the end of the session. We'll try to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to them, some presenters will join the chat and try to answer questions individually. This presentation will review key guidance, resources, and relevant findings and recommendations from our latest report to Congress that are most applicable to ASU and other academic institutions. Please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Andrew Nielson.
All right, thank you, Mia. I appreciate the introduction. I'll maybe give a tiny bit more about my background and why I'm here. I'm sharing on the screen first intro slide for the presentation with a lot of government organizational names. So my name, as Mia mentioned, is Andrew Nielson. I'm the director of the Government-Wide IT Accessibility Program. That sits within the General Services Administration in their Office of Government-Wide Policy, Office of Technology Policy. And the reason I'm here is because GSA, and by delegation me and my program, we have the responsibility to provide technical assistance to agencies and to individuals. So it literally could be anyone in the world. In meeting the requirements of Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. That Section 508, as many of you may already be aware, of course, requires federal agencies to make our IT accessible to people with disabilities. And we also maintain, we share that responsibility with the Access Board, first I should say, where the U.S. Access Board also writes and maintains the Section 508 standards. And GSA, we maintain a website, Section 508 or section508.gov, where we provide a lot of guidance and information to agencies, to individuals, and to anyone hoping to implement digital accessibility at their organizations. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So we'll get through first a little bit of why accessibility matters, kind of setting the stage. This is hopefully a review for most of you. And then I'll talk a little bit about legislative and regulatory changes, current events, the overall landscape for digital accessibility. I believe that on your agenda for today, there's another session on the legal implications of changes and a new rule that the Department of Justice just issued last year with a web rule under ADA for Title II entities. I'll talk to that, but we'll defer to that session for all of the great details there and about how Arizona State University is implementing that. I'll talk a little bit more about our program and what we have to offer, including some recent congressional and executive actions and some of our activity there to respond to those actions. And then really the meat of it is I want to share some insights that we've gained from a report that we conducted or that we produced in response to Congress about the accessibility of federal agencies or the accessibility of federal agencies' information and communication technologies. And in particular, I want to offer some insights that you might be able to use at Arizona State University or wherever you are. So again, setting the stage, 61 million adults in the United States lives with some form of a disability. So that's roughly 1 in 4 Americans or American adults. Many of whom, so that kind of runs the gamut of different types of disabilities. 14% are blind or have limited vision. 13% are deaf or have limited hearing. 35% with limited reach, strength or manipulation, so some type of a mobility impairment. 54% with other limited mobility. And that's coming from, it's outdated now, but still from the 2010 US Census. But the kind of major message I want to get across, we hear often in our interactions with sometimes federal employees, and unfortunately, that might say that they don't need to care, or they don't care about accessibility, or they don't need to address it because they've never heard a complaint about one of their products, or a document, or set of documents, or web pages. But the fact is that many people probably are if you don't care about accessibility, many people probably are encountering challenges with the content you're providing. And just because you haven't heard about a complaint doesn't mean that those challenges don't exist. The fact is, our neighbors, our friends, many of you probably have relatives that live with some type of a disability, and accessibility standards and initiatives are meant to level the playing field and give them equal opportunity to participate in government or in academics. So moving into to just talk a little bit about the legislative and regulatory landscape, kind of setting the stage for the broader discussion. I mentioned already Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It was amended in 1998 to add Section 508, and specifically require that federal agencies in particular make our IT, or our information and communication technology accessible to people with disabilities, whether we're developing it brand new, whether we're simply maintaining it or only using it, or if we're buying it. And that's focused both on members of the public who are making use of government IT or ICT, or need access to government information, but it also applies to federal employees. So the types of accessibility considerations that we need to do our jobs on a daily basis and to provide service to the American public. And I mentioned already that the GSA has a task under Section 508 to provide technical assistance. That same legislation tasked the U.S. Access Board to define the technical and functional standards. And those standards are broken down by largely by functionality. But it covers hardware, software, electronic content, which includes documents, presentations, and then it also, speaking in a little bit more detail, gives some guidance on when. So anytime we make information public, whether it's a website or a document on a website, that has to be accessible or follow the standards. But it also applies to agency official communications. So it could be an email or a document where we're making some type of a determination on a benefit or other communication, official communication from the government. And in 2017, that went through a refresh. The original standards, defined all the way back in 2000, and becoming in effect in 2001, were based on the first version of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but it did not incorporate those by reference. It restated them in the original standards. But in 2017, the Section 508 standards were refreshed. The regulation was revised and adopted by reference the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.0, levels A and level AA. And that will come back when we talk about now the Americans with Disabilities Act, and some Arizona policy. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title II, applies to state and local government organizations. And recently, the Department of Justice issued a new rule titled the Accessibility of Web Information and Services, of state and local government entities. It's in the 28 CFR Part 35 is where it exists in the Code of Federal Regulations. But this applies to web and mobile content and applications. Remembering that Section 508 applies to more than that, to hardware and software client applications and electronic documents, whereas the rule that the Department of Justice issued applies only to web and mobile content and applications. And the ADA rule, or the ADA Title II rule, requires conformance to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.1, levels A and AA. And so when we get to Arizona state policy, Arizona State Policy 1300 requires all state of Arizona electronic and information technology to be accessible to people with disabilities, and then specifically cites Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act as the requirement. So again, there's some overlap between Section 508 and the ADA web rule. But the Arizona state policy refers to Section 508 specifically. But then it also makes a statement that business units, including Arizona State University, may use the latest version of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, level A and AA. And the World Wide Web Consortium released version 2.2 of that Web Content Accessibility Guidelines in October of 2023, so a year ago. So we have kind of some maybe not quite exactly aligned the standards, Section 508 at version 2.0 of WCAG, but also has standards for software and hardware that the Arizona state policy refers to. The ADA applies to the ADA Title II rule applies to web content and applications requiring conformance at level 2 for version 2.2 of WCAG, and then the Arizona state policy also encouraging business units to adopt the latest WCAG standard. So why why does it matter where do I come in, and how can I help you? I mentioned that my organization, my office, we maintain Section 508.gov, and while the federal standard is still pinned to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.0 for web content and for electronic content, we do have a lot of how-tos, how to create a particular type of content, whether on the web or electronic content. But we also have a lot of other information related to policy and program management, regardless of the institution. While it is focused more towards federal agencies and organizations, regardless of the organization, there's some really useful content on, just for managing accessibility programs. A guidance on accessible acquisition, design and development, accessibility testing, and all kinds of training and events that we invite folks to. In fact, I'll make a plug. We host our own accessibility event every year, and I'll come back to that maybe later. But a version of that is happening just next week on the 13th and 14th that anyone can register for, including academic institutions, and you don't have to be a federal employee to attend. And then again, we conduct our congressionally mandated annual report now. We've produced one of those and currently in the process of producing the second. So that report was required as part of a provision in a Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023 that required then the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, to define new assessment criteria for federal agencies. And then it required federal agencies to respond, of course, to that report. And then that legislation required OMB to consult with my organization, with the General Services Administration, as well as with the U.S. Access Board to create those assessment criteria. And then it flipped the responsibility for producing the report and gave the responsibility to GSA, to me and my organization, to produce the report based on the data that agencies provided. And of course, we were consulting with, and we're required to consult with OMB in producing that report. And of course, the U.S. Access Board is our close partner as well. But that report required kind of stipulated a few requirements in that legislation from Congress. First, that we produce a comprehensive report by agency, and then government-wide generally, on the compliance of those agencies with the accessibility standards. And it required also a detailed description of what GSA, what my organization is doing, both what we have done over the past year and what we plan to do in the upcoming year to advance accessibility, or to improve it government-wide. And then it also asked for a list of recommendations to Congress to help improve accessibility to Congress and to agencies, for them to take and take action on. Though we don't have any directive authority, they are still recommendations. So some of our findings from the report. I'm displaying on the screen here. It's basically the same data, but I have two different charts, one with more detail than the other. But we got responses from 249 discrete reporting entities or agencies, federal agencies. And we asked a number of questions related to both the implementation, to the maturity of agencies' accessibility programs. So we asked agencies about the types of characteristics and behaviors that we think are indicative of mature implementation of accessibility programs. And then we also asked specifically about how accessible or how conformant to the Section 508 standards certain information and communication technology products are. And we combined those across two indices, a maturity index and a conformance index, and each are on a 5-point scale, so from very low to very high. And what I'm displaying here on the screen is a representation of where agencies fell in that kind of 5x5 matrix against the maturity and the conformance indices. And what we're seeing here on the left side of the screen is a heat map where we see a lot of the shading, the darker the shading, the more the higher the number. That's also visible with the number. But in that 5x5 matrix, just to describe what we're seeing a lot more shading in the area of the chart, or that 5x5 matrix that is between very low maturity and moderate maturity. And in fact, 76% of federal agencies fell in that range of very low maturity to moderate maturity and very low conformance to moderate conformance only. So the remaining 24% were above that. They were high maturity or very high, or high conformance or very high conformance. And on the right side of the screen is a scatter plot that gives more detail about where they fell on a more detailed pointed scale against each of those matrices as well, the maturity and conformance matrix. And we using the scatter plot, we can identify kind of the trend of correlation, and we do see that there is some correlation that agencies that tend to report higher maturity also tend to report higher conformance. And so just one of our major findings that just gives us some indication of whether or not we're asking the right questions about maturity to identify some correlation to conformance. The major finding here is the majority. One of our next major findings. So the major finding here is that there's a lot of room for improvement. With 76% of agencies only from very low to moderate maturity and conformance, there's a lot of room for improvement. Another point to demonstrate the room for improvement, we also asked agencies to report on the conformance of their top viewed or most viewed information, web pages, electronic documents, and videos. So we asked both for their intranet or internal websites, as well as their external public-facing internet websites. 25% of intranet pages fully conformed to the Section 508 standards. 22% of internal, I got reversed that, but 25% of internal intranet pages were fully conformant. 22% of external publicly facing web pages were fully conformant. 24% of electronic documents, and 29% of their most viewed videos. So we asked that their top 10 web pages, internal and external, top 10 electronic documents, and their top 5 videos. So across the board, across each of those categories, the highest performing was still less than 30% of those top 5 videos were fully conformant to the Section 508 standards. Maybe a little bit busier slide, but by product type, we also asked about more very specific types of information and communication technology, and I probably won't go through each of these, but we asked about the enterprise time and attendance system, mandatory training, the email application, the W-2 form that agencies provide to their employees every year so that they can do their taxes. And the highest conformance was for the agency enterprise email applications that was 62.2% of those were conformant, or 62.2% conformant. And the lowest was for the W-2s. And there's a little bit more of a story behind the W-2s. There are really only about 4 or 5 federal agencies that produce the W-2s on behalf of all other agencies. And so what that indicates, of course, that while we have very low performance, we also have a strong opportunity to realize some improvement just by engaging with those few agencies who produce W-2s on behalf of the rest of the federal government. And a major point here is that for every instance of noncompliance, there's somebody that is experiencing a challenge. Now somebody needs to ask for help to potentially to do their taxes if their W-2 form is not fully accessible. If I need to log into a secure application, or I might not even be able to participate in meetings, or take mandatory training. So I might be required to take training, and then might risk poor performance ratings or reviews if I can't complete my training, and yet you're also keeping me from doing it if I'm an employee with a disability. So of course, I guess another part of the story is that for many of these applications that we asked about, federal agencies tend to use a lot of the same software. Not all. The time and attendance system, there are lots of examples of that, but we tend to coalesce around some prime examples where agencies are using some of the same software across the board. It's also true for our email applications, and if not the training, but the learning management systems that we use to manage those training. And so there's some great opportunity to engage with the makers or producers of those high-use software applications to improve the accessibility of those things that we use most across government. And of course, we have opportunity to share best practices. And I would argue, of course, that's true also for academic institutions, where our use of particular examples of software again, coalesces around some prime examples of those tools and applications. All right, key finding 2, resources are impactful. For federal agencies, there has been some requirement since 2013 that at least every CFO Act agency should define or identify a Section 508 coordinator, and we've moved from using that term to a Section 508 program manager, but we did ask agencies to report on first of all whether or not they have a Section 508 program manager identified or assigned, but we also asked about their engagement, how much time they're spending on Section 508 related activities. Not all Section 508 program managers spend all of their time doing Section 508 related things or accessibility related things. For many, it's a part-time job or an ancillary duty. And so we wanted to get more information about how much time Section 508 program managers are spending focused on accessibility. So 28% of agencies reported that they have a full-time Section 508 PM. 51% reported that they have only a part-time Section 508 PM, and disappointingly, the 20.5% of agencies or reporting entities reported that they have no Section 508 program manager. But we also found that where Section 508 program managers are identified, whether full-time or part-time, and I guess in particular for those that are part-time, that entities with who had Section 508 PMs who spent more time. I mean, it almost seems like this. I mean, it's common sense, of course, but we have the data to back it up. The more time that Section 508 PMs spend doing accessibility related things, the higher that agency's maturity tended to be, and that was our strongest correlation between all of our data points. So on average, Section 508 program managers only spent 15.4, so even slightly less than part-time doing Section 508 related or accessibility related things. But the higher the maturity, the more hours and agencies, the higher the maturity of the agency with regard to Section 508 or accessibility implementation, the more hours we saw Section 508 program managers spending. We also asked agencies how many full-time equivalents. So it might not be individuals, but it might be accumulate or cumulative hours that might add up to a full-time equivalent across their organization. How many people are spending time dedicated to advancing their accessibility program goals and initiatives? So again, the more mature entities tend to have more FTEs or full-time equivalents dedicated to advancing the work of accessibility programs. On the left side of the chart, we see that the comparison of full-time equivalents to maturity, and as the amount of full-time equivalent goes up from 0.2 on average for very low maturity agencies, up to 8.3 average FTEs for the very high performing or high maturity agencies. With a little bit of a blip, it's not quite a straight line, a little bit of a blip in the moderate maturity bracket or category. On the right side, we do see quite a kind of an anomaly. Again, it's not at all a straight line. We have for very low conformance, where we have FTEs compared to conformance, 1.9 average FTEs for agencies that have very low conformance. Kind of rounding up to, if we ignore the low category, rounding up to 8.2 FTEs for those agencies that tend to have very high conformance. And the blip we see is 6.1 FTEs for the category of agencies that report very low, or not very low, low conformance. So on average, 6.1 FTEs. But that anomaly has to do with one or two agencies that just happened to report a lot of FTEs, indicating that they didn't quite understand the question or how to report or calculate FTEs. So that kind of threw off our numbers. But again, again, it's common sense, but the more time we spend on it, the more people we have dedicated to focusing on accessibility issues, the better off we are, and it results in in dramatic changes to accessibility with just a few additional resources, and just a little bit more time. So, of course, our recommendations are the key person in the equation is the accessibility program manager, or in federal government the Section 5 program manager, but also to ensure that we have sufficient resources to support that Section 5 program manager and the program, the accessibility program. You can read the full report on section5way.gov. I won't read off all of the URLs here, but we'll note that this presentation is available in the download section for the ASU Accessibility Day website, in the agenda, I believe, somewhere. But you can also get there by going to section5way.gov and then use the search to search for assessment or congressional report, and you can find your way there. Another requirement from Congress was to ensure that all of the data the agencies report is made public, and so we have not just the report there, but we have all of the raw data also available for download, so anyone can do their own analysis based on agency responses. All right, so a couple things to point out. We also conducted a kind of a follow-up informal study, or maybe more subjective study. We followed up with agencies that were that tended to perform better, maybe not very high conformance and very high maturity, but in somewhere in that range of high maturity and high conformance. To identify, what are the things that stand out? What are the things that make a difference in terms of their performance? So sorry, we only had 7% of entities scoring somewhere in that range, both high or very high for maturity or conformance. So again, we asked, we followed up with those agencies, maybe not every single one of them, but we followed up with a number of them, really to identify, what are the practices, what are the things that stand out, what matters, how did you get to where you are in terms of maturity and conformance. So the foundations coming from that subjective study, after interviews and a couple focus groups with those agencies, it kind of boils down to three foundational areas. So situational awareness and goal setting. You have to know where you are, having a baseline to know where you need to go, and then setting effective goals and identifying key performance indicators. The second really foundational area is leadership and coordination. We found over and over again in our interviews with folks is that while of course grassroots efforts matter, having leadership endorsement and leadership direction on behalf of the entire organization really helped solidify the efforts of the accessibility programs. And helped move that needle, and it was huge in affecting the culture of the organization. And that didn't necessarily have to come just from the leader or the head of the agency, but from key leaders and those that you might identify as key change agents. And then another, again, maybe surprising, maybe not surprising, had to do with the setting of the location of the accessibility program operations. It does matter, it turns out, where, and it matters how those relationships are managed between an accessibility program and those with that have the most responsibility for your digital content and or your digital assets. So funding is important, and it's important that the people who are most responsible for the accessibility of products and content are also paying to ensure that those things are conformant and conform to the law and to the regulation. It's also important that not only those people, the agencies that are most responsible, or the entities, the parts of your organization that are most responsible, but so we have this kind of phrase: establish that 100% of any division's budget covers 100% of the target population. My budget needs to also include individuals with disabilities in consideration for their needs, is the point. And so it's not only your IT division, but it's wherever I have a population of individuals with disabilities, and I'm producing digital assets, digital content applications that I need to make sure that content is accessible to my population. And it's important, as a matter of policy, to spell that out, but in particular to make sure that that our leadership and those most responsible are also held accountable. It's important to have metrics, performance metrics that incorporate accessibility requirements as part of our how I get graded as an executive, let's say. Two things that we can do is focusing on the foundational shifts, changes in they tend to have greater impact, of course. So some of these, focusing on leadership coordination, focusing on goal setting, and focusing on ensuring that I have accountability where it matters most. That really helps change the culture. And focusing on those foundational improvements are just critical for long-term success. All right, so some additional resources that can be helpful. Again, outside of the federal government, our Section 508.gov website has things that are useful, not just to federal agencies, but for anywhere where you might be implementing an accessibility program. So we have developed an asset or a resource we refer to as the Technology Accessibility Playbook that will help you build an effective program or grow a program to be more effective. We walk through 12 different plays in that playbook, from establishing a technology accessibility program manager, making sure you have a policy, defining a roadmap to get from where your baseline is to where you want to be, of course, as well as integrating it into your technology life cycles and acquisition processes, and focusing. Play 12, it doesn't necessarily have to be the last play. These aren't all necessarily in order, but to educating the workforce. And that resource is available again on Section 508.gov under our management section, with a lot of great information there. And the other note I'll make is that we are updating that content to make it even more useful with more how-tos and assets and artifacts that you might use as part of your processes. So be on the lookout for more information on that as well. A couple tools that we think also can be helpful. Again, our focus is more geared towards federal standard, but we have produced a tool called the Accessibility Requirements Tool, available at section 508.gov/ART or ART. And this tool is kind of a TurboTax-like tool that walks you through with questions to identify what type of information and communication technology is in question, and based on that, then identify what standards, what Section 508 standards apply to that particular product or type of ICT. That's useful both in market research, so that I can identify if I'm doing market research or alternatives analysis for a particular type of ICT or for a particular type of function, that I can identify what standards apply, so that I can use those to evaluate the product, or the alternatives. But the tool also will produce solicitation language that you can include, you can copy and paste right into your statement of work or elsewhere in your contract, to make sure that those are part of a contract if you're soliciting either a quote for a particular product or set of products, or a bid or proposal for delivery or development of products. And again, while this is focused on Section 508 as the federal standard, we also recently developed an application programming interface, and we're working on some content. It's available on GitHub as an open source resource, and developed some content to make it easier for you to pull this out of our section508.gov full website and implement it and change it in your own environment. So you could use this. You could make modifications to implement it in your environment, and or could via API use it and integrate some of its functionality into your let's say contract writing process. Another tool we hope will be very useful is part of we refer to it as our open ACR portfolio. Many of you may be familiar with the term VPAT or VPAT, that stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. That's kind of an industry standard template for reporting conformance against accessibility standards for industry products. And the output of that would be an accessibility conformance report. And a couple challenges with that is that the VPAT template is a document. It's a Word document, and typically we see then the output, the accessibility conformance report. Sorry, I'm just going to tighten my blinds so we don't see as much of the glare on my face. That template, then the output is then also typically in a Word file or a PDF document, and the information included in that is trapped inside of that file. So the particulars, the data is not machine readable data, and it makes it hard to share that data outside of that file. So first is coming up with a way to make it easier to access and share that data via a machine readable data schema. So we've done two things. First is to define that schema, and two is to make provide a tool to make it easy to create that accessibility conformance report in a machine readable format. And that's available via acreditor.section508.gov. That gives you a friendly user interface, just like entering it in a Word document. In that Word document template, you can instead use this tool and then output it to a machine readable data file, rather than just a Word document. And you can also print it to output it to an HTML document that looks nice and pretty. But then you can also do anything you want with that data, to analyze, to share. And the next step for us is to provide a central repository for accessibility conformance reports. So rather than having to look in multiple places, if I'm considering multiple alternatives for a particular product, we're hoping to make it easier to find accessibility conformance reports in one place, so that I don't have to ask over and over again from among different vendors. But then even better, again, we've produced an application programming interface as part of that repository, so that as we get data from product vendors, that information can be shared in marketplaces, whether federal marketplaces, or at bestbuy.com or Walmart or Amazon, so that when you go, the future vision would be that when you go to those marketplaces to purchase products, right next to the product description and specifications, you should be able to also see the accessibility conformance information right alongside it. Again, those tools are all open source and available for others to use, and definitely looking for engagement on that. All of these resources again are available in by link in my presentation file that you can download on the ASU Accessibility Day website. Again, would highly encourage use of. We have all kinds of training: how to make a document accessible, how to make a presentation accessible. But we have a lot of great guidance on how to manage programs, and how to encourage folks to in general awareness on accessibility. How to encourage your coworkers to get the accessibility bug and ensure that their products are accessible. So definitely visit section508.gov. If you have questions about content that's there or general questions, you can contact our program at section.508@gsa.gov, or you can stumble across our contact information that will on section508.gov, and get to the same location, or get to that same email address. All right, with that, I'll open it up to questions for the last few minutes we have remaining. I think I might see one question in the Q&A pod. Do you have recommendations for building a Section 508 program when there isn't a budget for it? Or what areas in an organization should focus on when there isn't any funding? Yeah, that's definitely a question we face regularly, and my recommendation to you is not to see it as something extra, but as part of your process. And there may be some initial investment, but it mostly has to do with training and getting the right skills. And in most organizations, you make time for training. And it's really more about prioritizing. So if we're talking about a development team to develop a software application, or if we're talking about getting your professors involved in making sure that their stuff is accessible, it's more about making it part of the process. So I would recommend getting away from the idea that I have to make it accessible after the fact. Or that I have to do something extra to make it accessible when I'm done with my document. But really, if it's part of a document creation or content creation process, or it's part of the development process, then it's really more about just training us to make sure that we're doing it the right way in the first place. And a lot of it is just following best practices and or specifications, rather than learning a whole new set of skills. There are some small differences in how I might approach my content or my product, but making those small changes in mindset and just knowing that there are a few of these things that I need to do as I go makes a big difference. And so I don't need a lot of extra budget to fix stuff, if I can just get it right in the first place. And so that's the mindset or the approach that I would recommend. And so if I don't have budget, well, I spend time on training, make sure that the people that I'm bringing on board the next time, or make sure that the people that I have on board have the right knowledge, have the right skills, and that's about training. I hope that helps a little bit, but please feel free to continue to weigh in or continue the question.
Thank you, Andrew. If there are any other questions, please place those in the Q&A section. I think for now that was all the questions we had here.
Right.
Right. And while we wait, I'll just let you know we'll begin the next session, Enhancing Python and Data Science Education for Blind and Visually Impaired Students, in just a few minutes. It looks like we do have an additional questions. Do you have any recommendations on bringing faculty on board when many feel overworked already?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Also, this is just one more thing that I have to do among all of the requirements. For there's a whole host of things I have to do just to publish my content for my students. I think it has more to do with. I think a good suggestion is helping them see the human need. Um, if you can recognize that now, most professors, my including my own brother, when they have a student that has a need, they're very motivated to make sure that that student gets the information that they need, in the way that they need it. So that whether that's making sure the content is printed in Braille, or making sure that the content is accessible digitally, in their presentations, that gives the motivation. And so it helps, to have that human need. And the problem is that we don't always see that human need. Many people with disabilities are not always keen on divulging that, not because they necessarily might be ashamed of that, but they don't want to be seen as the problem, or the thing that causes you to put in more effort to accommodate my needs. And so, there's always, of course, there's always the stick that that if you don't make this thing accessible, then there's legal risk to the institution, because a student might be able to file a complaint and or a lawsuit. Yeah, there's always the stick approach, but I think the more effective method is by appealing to the human need, and using the carrot approach of, this is something that you have students, that need this, and if you can just learn those few things, it's not a lot. It really honestly isn't, but it does require a little bit of time to know what those things are, how I structure my content, adding alt text to images, making sure that I'm using headings and bullets that with the embedded styles. It really isn't a whole lot. And we have tools that are making it easier for us to get to as well. If maybe not so much in the Google Workspace tools yet, though there are making some improvements, but in the Microsoft suite of tools, using Accessibility Checker, there are things that can help us, take, maybe not take shortcuts, but help us, make us more aware of how I can fix things. So I think, yeah, appealing to the human need, using that carrot approach, I think really helps professors understand why it's important, and just helping them realize that even though they might not always see it, that need is there, and sharing those real life examples of people, and the challenges that we sometimes inadvertently create, helps motivate.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrew. I think that is all the questions we have here today. We will begin the next session here shortly. The next session is Enhancing Python and Data Science Education for Blind and Visually Impaired Students. You can join us in the Ventana room at the Tempe MU, or here on Zoom virtually. Thank you, everyone, and we'll begin in just a moment.
Thank you.